So first off, thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So let's get started and talk about why are you running for the Wisconsin State Supreme Court?
So the reason why I'm running is the same reason I went from the Circuit Court to the Court of Appeals. I wanted to do something, give something more back to the state of Wisconsin. And being on the Court of Appeals, you impacted more cases than the Circuit Court. But being on the State Supreme Court, I have an opportunity to address issues and matters that are of statewide importance, not just locally. And also, I looked at the court and I had some great concerns that our state Supreme Court is heading down a very bad path. We're putting individuals who are more politicians than judges on that bench. And I looked at that and thought, I am a judge. I've been a judge for about 10 years, and that's what I wanted to do.
And so you kind of touched on this, but what are you hoping to bring to that seat that's not on that court right now?
Well, I'm hoping to bring to the seat, to the state Supreme Court, a better sense of independence and impartiality and integrity. I think it's really important that we stop the races that have been happening in the state of Wisconsin, where we're turning our judicial races, which are nonpartisan, into political races, and we're looking to put politicians or legislators on that court. I have always been independent. I've always been a judge who's actually looked at the rules, looked at the laws, looked at the facts, and looked at everything like that. So I'm hoping to bring that to the court, as well as maybe a little bit of diverse thought, trying to, even though I'm not flipping the court from their judicial philosophy, I think I can bring maybe more a sense of collegiality, which is what I'd like to bring to that court. And actually, I think the citizens of Wisconsin would appreciate that.
And I want to touch on something you just said there, because it was also in your campaign video, which is when you said that you want to stop the politicization of the courts, and this comes after record spending we saw in the spring. How do you plan to do that?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. Well, first of all, if we don't do that, we are endangering the state of Wisconsin and going down a horrible path. But I think that the way we do that is to have a campaign, as I intend to have through the state of Wisconsin. Tell the citizens of this state that there are 3 branches of government and that we need to put judges in our highest court, on our highest court, and we don't want anyone else there. And as to the record spending, I think there are a lot of races this year coming up in 26, which people are going to put a lot more money into. Judges don't fundraise. We're not ethically allowed to ask at all. But I think that what's important is to tell people that we have to draw this line right now in the sand and say, if we don't do this now, we will have a political court, we will have a super legislature in Madison, and that's not what our government should be or intends to be.
And do you feel like you need to raise a certain amount of money for this race?
That's an interesting question. We just got into this race. I think I always look at my watch. It's 15 days now, so I'm not sure where it's going to stand and where the money would have to be. But the question is not so much as the money you need to raise to run this race. The question is how you need to reach everyone in the state. And I think we're looking at very creative ways to reach different groups of people who have not really been reached out to, who maybe feel a little bit disrespected or disregarded by judicial candidates, and I intend to change that, to go a little younger, to go into a lot of areas throughout the state, and to talk to people and explain to them why the courts are important and why you need a judge, not a politician, on that bench.
So is there a dollar amount that you are looking at right now?
I have nothing. You'd have to actually talk to my people about what they're thinking. I can tell you that I don't think in any way, shape, or form whatsoever that we're going to hit the numbers they hit last year.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that too, because we saw Elon Musk, for example, pouring in a lot of money. So if you were to look to campaign and raise money, where would that come from for you?
Where am I looking to fundraise?
Yes.
One, again, judges we don't ask for money, that we're not ethically allowed to do that. The areas where we fundraise are people who look at my website, hear me speak, who think that they respect my intention to bring integrity back to this court, and those individuals will hopefully donate to their time or their money or their assistance to move me forward and put me into the position where I can be on the state Supreme Court.
And I want to get your opinion on something here. When announcing her decision not to run for re-election, Justice Rebecca Bradley said, quote, "For years I have warned that under control of judicial activists, the court will make itself more powerful than the legislature, more powerful than the governor." That warning went unheeded, and Wisconsin has seen only the beginning of what is an alarming shift from thoughtful, principled judicial service towards bitter partisan personal attacks and a political gamemanship that have no place in court. And do you agree with that statement from Justice Bradley?
I do. I think that's exactly what I've been talking about. We're looking at political campaigns being run for judges. We're looking at individuals who are seeking this bench not to stay in the lane of the judiciary, but to become a super legislature. My opponent, Chris Taylor, who is running for this position as well, was a Democratic legislator. She is someone who's voted on issues that I think show how far out of the mainstream she is from everyone in the state of Wisconsin. For example, she voted not once but twice against the Victims' Rights Act, which later 75% of the people in the state of Wisconsin said was necessary, important, and they voted for.
And so I wanted to ask too, there are several high issue topics that could make their way to the court in coming months. That includes abortion, collective bargaining, redistricting, and other election rules. Now, you've previously said that you will not share how you would rule on future cases, but that's something we've seen from other candidates getting into races like this. What is your thoughts on that?
All right, so first of all, and this is the question that people don't understand, judges are not ethically allowed to say how they're going to rule on a specific case. So we can't say if we're going to have a case about land use between these two parties, how would I rule? That's inappropriate for several reasons. One, I don't know what the facts are in that case, and I don't know what the law is that I'm looking at. As to these hot button issues, judges are not also supposed to tell how they're going to rule on those, but what you can do is you can look to see how a judge has ruled previously. So for example, in my case, you can look at my opinions that are out there, they're published, and you can see how I faithfully look and toe the line as to what the law is, what the Constitution is, and what they say, and that I interpret them in a certain way under my judicial philosophy. And then you can look at my opponent, who said she's walking into this position telling everyone that she's going to have a people-centered judicial philosophy, which I don't know what that means, but I'm concerned that she means she's not going to be looking at the law. She's going to be looking at people and saying whether that person deserves to win more than someone else. When we take an oath as a judge, which I've now done twice, you have to say that we will administer justice without respect to persons. I know that sounds wonky and stupid and doesn't make a lot of sense when you first hear it, but what it really means is, as a judge, we're not supposed to care if the person walks in and they're a member of a political party that's donated money, or they're the biggest corporation and they have the best lawyers in the state, or they're a homeless individual who's represented by the public defenders. We're supposed to say, what are the facts, what is the law, and that's why there's an outcome. So everyone who walks into my court, when I was on the circuit bench, or the Court of Appeals, walks out, they may not be happy they won or lost. Well, they won't be happy they lost, but when they walk out, at least they'll know two things. I respected them, I showed them dignity and respect as people in my courtroom, and two, they have an end result that was based on the facts and the law, and while they may not like it, they can at least respect that I ruled with impartiality and integrity.
And would you consider that your philosophy?
Yes.
And I want to move now to, because you were previously Assistant Attorney General to former Governor Scott Walker.
Well, actually, I was an Assistant Attorney General. It was not for Scott Walker. I was under J.B. Van Hollen and then Brad Schimmel. But go on.
Well, you defended Act 10 in court.
I defended part of Act 10 in court, but what's the question?
Well, a circuit court judge ruled in December that the law is unconstitutional, but put a hold pending an appeal. Now, if this were to make its way back to the Supreme Court, would you recuse yourself from that decision?
No, and I'll explain why. So when I was working for the Attorney General's office as an Assistant Attorney General, one of many of them, about over 150, we were not allowed to take cases that impacted our benefits as state employees. There was one Assistant Attorney General who was not in the union that we all had to join, and he was the one who did that. So the Act 10 case that I worked on was just specifically, was this law, any law, was this law properly passed by the legislature and enacted into a law by Secretary La Follette? And that was the only question I dealt with. After my case, when the state Supreme Court said yes, it was properly published, it was properly put forward, then they started going to the merits of Act 10. I had nothing whatsoever to do with any case that involved the merits of Act 10. So there's no reason that I would see at this point in time that I would have to recuse. Now, obviously, if the case comes up and I see that there are people who, you know, if it's someone I know who's involved as a party, then I'd have to have another look at that. But as of right now, as to the merits, I have no basis to recuse.
So you don't feel that you have any bias in this case?
No.
All right. And moving now to a different topic here. Pro-Life Wisconsin also endorsed you as what they said, quote, calling you the only choice for pro-life voters. Do you agree with that description?
The only choice for pro-life. So I'm not sure what they're going to do in this race. That was my endorsement in the Court of Appeals race. I think what the question is more as to the views on abortion in the state of Wisconsin, and I would love to address that and to start out and tell you that it's a very complicated issue. The questions on abortion laws confuse lawyers, not just people who are impacted by it. And more to the point, I think women have to deal with and struggle with the circumstances of abortion. For example, I can tell you personally that I have a good friend who was with me in high school, and I found out years later that while she was a minor, she actually had an abortion. And she told me, as I said, years later, and she was devastated by the fact that that had happened and her situation, and I was devastated that I didn't even know about it, and I wasn't there to be her friend. This is such a complicated area, and I can tell you abortion is not something that I would consider and not something I would do, but I can also tell you that the United States Supreme Court in the issuance of Dobbs, which everyone threw tantrums about and were very upset about, was actually very wise. Because what it did is it said each individual state can now have the members of that state, so the citizens of Wisconsin, we can now decide what we want to do about abortion. We can decide if we want to put limits on it, what limits we want to put, where we want them, if we want to consider any exceptions, if we want to say that once the baby has gone too far, you cannot have abortions. We're Wisconsin. We can make our rules and decide what we want to do as opposed to any other state, California, Texas, New York. Wisconsin gets this opportunity, and it's a great opportunity, and it's a great discussion people should have, women should have, as well as men, but we should have that discussion and say what we want. And so what's happened in the state of Wisconsin is the legislature actually passed a law, and the state Supreme Court has already ruled that it was constitutional, so the limit is 20 weeks. What's my view, my personal views? They really don't matter when I'm on the court. One, that's precedent. Two, my views and my personal position, I sort of say when I put on that black robe, I hold my personal views tight to myself and I don't rule on them, so my personal views don't matter. I think this issue has been resolved in the state of Wisconsin, and if it's going to be addressed again, then we the people, we the citizens of Wisconsin, we need to go to our legislature, which is the proper branch of government, have them pass a new law, have it signed by the executive, and then go back to the courts if they have to determine if the law is valid. So my personal views really don't matter.
And what do you think of the ruling that came down just earlier this year then?
On the ruling by the state Supreme Court? Well, one, it's sort of funny you're asking my position on an opinion that's done sort of by my supervising court. So they're my supervisors. My personal views, I don't know that I would have been in the majority on that case, but I didn't really study all the facts and all the details, and I didn't look to whether the law is or is not constitutional as it is.
All right, and I kind of want to get into your opponent in this race here. So in response to your campaign, your opponent's campaign manager released a statement saying, quote, if elected, Maria Lazar would be the most extreme member of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Can I get your response to that? I can see you smiling a little bit now.
So, well, first I'd say extreme member, I'm assuming they're saying on the conservative side. Well, when you have only 3 members that are on that side, and you have one who kind of flips back and forth occasionally, obviously I would be more to the other side of that individual. And I don't know if Justice Ziegler, former Chief Justice Ziegler, now Justice Ziegler, and I don't know if our philosophies align, so we may actually be on the same course, so I don't know that I would be the most extreme. And I'm assuming you're saying extreme right, which they're leaving out, because maybe I could say who's the most extreme left on that court.
Well, and that kind of goes into, this is a nonpartisan race, but you have been kind of dubbed the conservative candidate in it so far. So what is your response to that?
So I find that interesting when people throw labels like that, and that's exactly the problem that I see throughout this entire state about judicial races. Labels aren't that important when you're saying conservative or liberal. The question should be independent, impartial, and do they have integrity? Actually, it's funny, I just read this morning that Justice Kennedy from the United States Supreme Court, who's no longer on the court, who was considered that swing vote, he just wrote a book saying he was lamenting, decrying the fact that federal nominations for judges are now becoming so partisan, and I think that's exactly what's happening in Wisconsin as well. We are seeing these races turn into political races where we are attempting to put politicians on this court to make decisions for everyone in the state of Wisconsin when that is not what judges do. We don't go down that lane, and that's dangerous.
And do you feel, if considering your opinions in the way that you have ruled in the past, do you feel like you would be bringing balance to this court, as we saw from Justice Bradley and her concern about the way the court is going? Do you feel like you could bring that balance?
I think that I would bring balance to the court. I think I would also bring maybe a different sense of collegiality. I think I would bring an ability to work with both sides. I think that my personality and how I've always operated and how I operate on the Court of Appeals now, it's not just one person. When you're a circuit court judge, you're it. You're the judge, it's your courtroom, it's your rules, it's your decision. When you're on the Court of Appeals, there's panels of 3, so there's 2 other judges you have to persuade to go your way and to follow what you're saying and to issue your opinion. When you're on the state Supreme Court, there's 6 other justices that you have to persuade. And I think I would bring the ability to talk to every single one on that court, to communicate with them, to try to persuade them that my perception, my interpretation of the law is correct. And if I don't necessarily get them to agree 100%, maybe I can get them to agree a little bit. Maybe I can move people on cases. I mean, the state Supreme Court doesn't just do these high-profile cases. They just took a case about land use for the Native American tribes. They take cases about criminal burdens of proof. They are not always hot-button cases that people in the state think they are. It's a little bit boring at times, but that's what courts do.
And I wanted to ask, too, moving back to your campaign, how are you planning to attract voters on either side of the aisle?
Well, that's an excellent question. Thank you. What I'm doing is I am going everywhere. I've only been on the trail about 15 days. I'm going everywhere. I'm talking to everyone. I'm talking to both sides, not just both sides, all sides. I plan to not leave any areas of the state untouched. I plan to talk to people in Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire, La Crosse, Appleton, Green Bay, up north. I haven't said every county, and I apologize, to the Native American tribes. Everyone in the state I want to reach out to, and I want to explain to them, because I'm eternally optimistic that people in the state of Wisconsin are fundamentally in the middle. They want to see a court that doesn't act on either side, that acts and runs down this lane it's supposed to. And I think reaching out to people and telling them that, I am 100% optimistic that they will realize that they need to look at the merits of the candidates, and when they do so, they will see that I am the candidate who should move on to the state Supreme Court.
Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.